Hey everybody, it's Matt with Strategic Peace here to introduce another video edition of our Strategic Peace Talks blog. This time I sat down with John Zivley. He's a corporate real estate broker with NAI Partners here in Houston, and we talked all things corporate real estate, especially what a growing company might want to take into consideration as they move into the corporate real estate market in this post-COVID world. Hopefully you enjoy our conversation. I certainly found it very informative. If you do, please like the video and also follow us on YouTube and follow our LinkedIn account. All right. Hello, everybody. This is Matt Bell of Strategic Peace, and today I've got the pleasure of having a chat with my good friend John Zivley over at NAI Partners. John is in the commercial real estate business, which is definitely something very interesting to a lot of businesses, large and small, at the moment, with all the things that have been going on in life. So, hey, John, how are you doing?
I'm good. Doing well. Friday, so can't complain. Always a pleasure to talk to you. So excited to visit.
Absolutely. Well, we appreciate you making the time for us. Let's get kicked off with just a little bit about, who are NAI Partners and what is your role there, and maybe how's that been shifting a little bit over the last 6 months?
Sure. So NAI Partners, we're a full service commercial real estate firm. Our focus originally, and so I've only been with NAI for really roughly a year, just over a year. But NAI started as more of a tenant rep office focused firm and has evolved over the years to the last probably 15 years to more full service. So we've got a landlord leasing team, we've got a development team, appraisal, the whole bit on the commercial side. So we can help you guys, help anybody, no matter what facet of real estate you may need. My focus is strictly office tenant rep. So I help users of space with their office lease negotiations predominantly. From time to time, we'll help groups buy a building, but really my bread and butter is leasing on the tenant rep side.
I guess the topic on everybody's mind is COVID. We've all gone into the work from home mode. We were fortunate. We started running our business from home before the pandemic began. But for a lot of people, that's made a huge shift out of office buildings, working from home, and we're kind of in the process of figuring out how to go back. So what does it look like on the ground in commercial real estate right now? How has that impacted you all?
It's changing, and it has been changing since mid-March and April. Obviously, many folks are, if not all folks, are working from home and have been since March. I think kind of the panic in April of, maybe we're never going back to the office. People, friends and family that I'm talking to, oh my gosh, your industry is dead. And, things like that have really evolved, in my opinion, to, gosh, I can't wait to get back to the office. Right. And maybe that's not everybody. I've got a good buddy that comes to mind. He's an attorney in a small practice, and he loves he has no kids and no wife, and he loves the idea of just waking up and working from his bed, and it just works for him, right? People like myself that has a young kid at home. There's a lot of distractions. I mean, I was itching to get back to the office, and am back at the office, and so. I think a lot of the large firms, the Googles of the world, if you will, the big, large tech companies, oil and gas, all the real large firms are still, in my opinion, going to have some level of work from home going forward. And many of them aren't going to be back for some time. But the trend that's changed in my mind from April, May, even June of, maybe this is working, and maybe we don't need to go back to the office has shifted in my mind from all the folks that I'm talking to I can't wait to get back to the office, or maybe I'm talking to the executives and they're saying, I can't wait for my employees to get back to the office because they're not quite as efficient working 5 days a week from home. Maybe we're going to let them, work 2 or 3 days from home and then come to the office, and we need to have some sort of collaboration and what have you. So those are the main things that I would say are kind of shifting and have been shifting over the last couple months.
Do you think it's going to change the way we build out offices? I mean, I've heard several companies say, yeah, we're going to need space to meet. The individual desk, not so much. That you could do from home if you don't have the distractions, as you talked about. But then when we want to come together as a group, when we want to bring groups of people together, that's not something anybody's got at home. That's got to be in some central place.
Yeah, I mean, I think absolutely. And that's the common topic, right? I think from the safety, new protocols, because of all the COVID stuff, you are going to see a shift towards maybe more closed office versus the open collaborative space. Now, because of what I just mentioned about some groups, allowing more employees to work from home, you may see more of a hoteling type situation where you don't have a permanent space, but you come in and visit. But then again, now doesn't that kind of have some health concerns of its own?
Right.
The truth is, I think the closed office tends to mean that you may be taking more space actually to accommodate more closed offices. But the work from home means maybe you need less space. So I kind of think those kind of counteract each other a little bit. Overall, I think it's obviously a negative for the real estate world, as if you're a landlord, especially. I think there's going to be tenants moving towards taking less space or just not expanding as maybe they would have been.
If you think about the Houston, obviously we're both Houston-based companies, so thinking about the Houston market in particular, I mean, in addition to COVID, we've seen the oil and gas industry, in the tank. Was having its own issues before COVID came along and put a dent in it. Seeing kind of a wave of bankruptcies and mergers and downsizings. I mean, more layoffs announced by a couple of major players this week. So where's the vacancy level sitting at? Is there a ton of Class A space sort of kicking around there still seems to be a lot of cranes in the skyline and office towers going up?
To answer, I guess, the first part of that question, I mean, I would say downtown is a ghost town right now in general. I think just generally there's larger companies downtown versus the rest of Houston. Don't get me wrong, there's large companies everywhere. So the big areas that I'd say are really struggling and that you're going to see big, large blocks of space coming on the market and already have downtown, energy corridor, and then really just throughout the city. I mean, no rhyme or reason, just the large companies that are struggling that don't need the space right now. As far as the cranes in the sky, I mean, certainly if you were already in the works of building a project and putting millions of dollars that you're going to continue to move forward. But the truth is, this is the time when many, developers are really bullish because they know the time that it's going to take to build a building, whether it be 24 months, 36, multiple years. The hope is that by the time that you deliver the space that you'll be in a new cycle. And on the up and up. And so it's not uncommon for a lot of building to happen in tough times.
So is the center of gravity in Houston shifting? I mean, I think when I came to Houston in 2001, downtown was a ghost town, and the energy corridor was getting built out. It's built out substantially over the last few years. The Beltway has seen a lot of commercial property going in. Thinking specifically about offices rather than the more multi-purpose stuff, where do you see the shifts in the market, the sort of major areas of Houston right now?
Gosh, I would have said, and this has nothing to do with COVID. I would have said that, a lot of folks have over the last few years seen the advantage of getting out of downtown. There's a lot of parking expenses that would drive you to do that. A lot of folks are just leaning towards working closer to home for obvious reasons. I think that the Galleria has actually, even, with all the traffic concerns, has actually seen a rise in occupancy. And, even though the energy corridor has had some struggles, there's kind of a movement going west.
Yeah, no, it's interesting. I mean, obviously we see a change in the traffic pattern right now. I mean, I live kind of in between the two. I'm between downtown and Galleria, and whether I go east or west, it's a lot easier than it was beforehand. And
oh my God,
we don't know how far pendulum's going to swing back. I think we saw some data recently that said it was all a complete spectrum. Some people wanted to be 100% at home, some 100% office, and everything in between. So there's obviously going to be some new normal where it balances out, and that's going to allow people to think differently about their commute. And maybe some of the stresses on downtown are eased off a bit, which makes it more attractive again to some people. So, thinking about that space, I mean, my experience of commercial real estate, I worked with you on a couple of deals, is you're always looking at long-term lease gets you a lower price, short-term lease is more expensive. So companies enter into these big deals. So they're sitting in an office space that they've leased up for the next 7 years, let's say, and suddenly realize they don't need half of it. So there's a big sublease component to this of how do we get rid of one of these floors? Is that market saturated? Is this an opportunity for smaller businesses to grab space that they might not have looked at before?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, the term or the phrase is the flight to quality, right? So, Class B typical users can potentially pick up a Class A space for B prices or below. So absolutely, yes, there would be kind of that draw, and that is happening a lot. I mean, a lot of folks, that's you meet with folks and they said, let's take advantage of the sublease space. The truth is a lot of it's in the full floor blocks. A lot of people don't realize that it's very, very expensive to take a full floor and divide it up. And so a lot of times it just makes more sense to lease the whole thing as is. So, smaller blocks, 5, 10,000 square foot, sublease space goes actually fairly quickly. Maybe not so much right now, but it will probably get eaten up a lot quicker than some of these full floor blocks that they're offering at 30% or below what it's worth.
So full floor, just for those that aren't as familiar with it, 20,000 square feet?
I'd say that's the benchmark, about 20,000 square feet.
And what's a Class A rent looking like right now? I know it varies across town, but what's a sort of a benchmark for us?
Well, first of all, the whole classification system is very subjective.
Sure.
And so, kind of the joke is you own it, it's Class A. So it's not, in my opinion, I have my own opinion of what a Class A building is. A++ building is going to be probably brand new, very efficient, all the, energy, so just top the line, has all the amenities, workout facility, blah, blah, blah. I mean, those can be in the, $50 a square foot plus range. Okay. Then again, you can have a very nice A- building in the Galleria that is fully leased, obviously doing really well, and be closer to $40 a square foot. Class B, I'm just spitting out numbers.
Sure, just for the less educated.
Yeah, $25 gross. Class C, in the teens. Most Class C buildings are still, arguing their Class B. So, it's kind of all
everybody wants to play one league above their ability, right?
Exactly. I don't blame them for doing it, but
No, absolutely. Yeah. So, thinking again about the impact that even if COVID goes away, right? Let's say we get the vaccine or the thing dies out, whatever it is by the end of next year. I think people's mindset about what makes a safe operating environment and a good office space has changed a bit. I mean, you just mentioned, gyms, for example, being the amenity du jour of a building. I'm not sure whether that's going to be as attractive going forwards. What do you see? Is there anything coming out yet where developers are saying, hey, we've got this in our building and it makes it more hygienic?
Well, the thing that comes to mind, and I don't pretend to understand it, but the airflow system. Sure. They talk about airplanes and what they're doing to, contain the virus or slow the spread of it. I think that a lot of buildings, if not all of them, up to a certain point are looking at ways to introduce that into their buildings, just to keep everybody safer and less outbreaks. And I mean, obviously it makes a lot of sense. I have no idea what the expense is, but I know that I've heard of some landlords that are looking into that.
And presumably easier to retrofit that on a newer system than it is some aging Class B or C building.
I would think so. But I'll tell you, as far as gyms and things, they're all closed. I mean, they may be starting to open back up a little bit, but they're all closed at the moment, is from what I've heard.
In building Starbucks, it's obviously there we go. We're just on a plug for Starbucks without even trying. So.
Yeah.
Going back to that kind of long-term commitment side of things. I mean, Strategic Peace works, as you know, with smaller businesses, not to say we don't work with the larger ones. We're seeing, quite a few clients right now in the more sort of couple of hundred employees end of life. But for those smaller players that are growing and they may be coming out of a co-working space or and then they're not able to continue just at home. So they want to go lease some space. How do they get in? What's the best deal they can hope for, do you think, from a tenant point of view?
And I'm assuming small, recently formed groups is kind of what you're referring to.
Yeah, right. So, 5-10 people companies that know they're going to grow. So they can't just sort of rent one room.
The issues, and I don't know if this is what you're getting at or not, but the issues that you're going to see, that you're going to run into are, not really having a history of paying rent. And so landlords are going to require above standard security deposits to secure the leases. In some cases, push for a personal guarantee. There's a number of ways around that to avoid it. I mean, I fight the hardest I can to avoid personal guarantees for my clients. Not that my clients are planning to walk away from a lease, but you really, obviously being personally liable is a is a risk. But the truth is, landlords are not in a position to walk away from a deal right now. And in general, I don't think that they would walk away from a newly formed company that's looking to lease space. I mean, I don't think they're going to run into too many hurdles there, other than the security deposit issue, and then of course the landlords typically are going to require 3, 5, 7-year leases, and a group of a newly formed group just may be uncomfortable with that, just not knowing where their business is going to go, just feeling less confident. The truth is, in that regard, a company, and you mentioned this a minute ago, just the different terms of leases and how, some folks are going to be leaning towards wanting to be more flexible and have a shorter term lease. And I certainly see the draw to that. A longer term lease, of course, you're going to get a better deal. Where's the common ground there that makes most sense for me? I would urge a group that, is confident, can see the light at the end of the tunnel with all this COVID stuff, and their business, know that they're going to be in a business long time. Yes, taking advantage of the deals right now and signing a long-term lease could make a lot of sense. I would push for, more flexibility than that, termination options, if you're anticipating growth, some options to expand. Don't lock yourself into a situation where you can't pivot to accommodate your needs, whatever they may be, good or bad. So just a lot of options, and I'd be pushing for them. I think they're really important at a time like this. And a landlord right now, if this tells you anything about what's good for a tenant, a landlord wants the most money possible, right? Sure. I'm on the other side of the transaction. So, landlords right now are willing to do short-term leases because nobody has a crystal ball, but they're, anticipating
they'd rather have some money
to go up in about 2 years. Right.
Yeah.
And so, they're like, oh, hey, yeah, of course, we'll be flexible. We'll sign a 2-year lease, lower than standard, but, likely the tenant is going to be kicking themselves in 3 or 4 years when they're renegotiating. I don't really know. I couldn't predict COVID. And so
you're the closest we've got to a seer around here. So we're going to put you on the spot. So just thinking about those other scenarios, we may have some people watching this that they have already entered into a lease a couple of years ago, and they're feeling a little underwater right now because they're seeing leases going for a lot less than that. How much power do they have to negotiate down?
Not a ton, right? Because they're locked into a lease. The shorter term that they have left, the more flexible that the landlord may be with restructuring their terms. So, anybody that signed a 7-10-year lease before 2020 and before, March of 2020 is not in a great spot.
Right.
However, we're approaching, and some landlords are not willing to talk about it, but, right now we're talking with 3 or 4 groups, me and my partner, with 3 or 4 groups where the tenant has about 3 years term left. And we're going ahead and saying, Mr. Landlord, we want to talk to you about, ways that we can, reduce my client's overall obligation, whether that be to cut their space down or to just renegotiate terms because we're in a different market. However, there has to be a give from the tenant as well, and it's likely to extend the term. And you probably can't just extend the term 6 months or a year. You probably need to extend the term by 4 or 5 years. To really make it make sense for a landlord. But, if a landlord wants to keep their tenants happy and keep their building full for a long time, they're going to try to accommodate their tenants even in a tough market like this, and know that if they don't, it's likely that the tenant in 3 years is going to be taking a hard look at leaving, which is going to cost more dollars to retrofit the space for somebody else. So, it's not a perfect world for the landlord right now, but a smart one is gonna take a hard look at trying to accommodate a tenant no matter what. But it's really a case by case basis, and I'm very careful about having this conversation with folks because I don't want to overpromise and underdeliver. We're going to bat for our clients, and in some case being successful, and others not. But it's something worth looking at if you could be saving thousands, hundreds of thousands of dollars a year by taking these next steps. So a lot of folks are looking into it.
Yeah, and I think you set some interesting context earlier on with that, the real estate market or the landlord side is reasonably bullish 2 to 3 years out. So the sort of futures curve for rents, in their opinion, is going back up. And so they're not likely to give too much if they think, hey, longer term, we're going to see this thing come back around. How do you think Houston compares to some of the other metros? I mean, there are certainly companies born in Houston that move away. We see them go to Austin. We see them go to Denver. We see them go to Dallas. But Houston's a growing city. I mean, there's been a migration into Houston over the last decade, and I think that's sort of continuing. So what does the future look like for Houston? Are companies wise to put down roots here?
I think so. I don't disagree with the forecast that the landlords are preaching. I think we're a very oil and gas, driven town. A lot of people would argue we're more diversified, and I think we are, but I still think our bones are oil and gas here in Houston. So the way that we're different from the Austins, the Denvers, the, cities in California, they're more tech driven generally. Denver, oil and gas as well. But do I think that Houston is a great place to hunker down and
it's a good Houston expression.
Yeah, hunker down. Yeah, I do. Maybe I'm just a little too loyal to Houston because I'm a native, but I think that Houston has some great things to come in the coming years. I think oil and gas is on its, will be on its rebound back, by the middle end of next year, I would hope. I think it's going to be a great place to be. Yeah.
And I think, Mayor Turner and a lot of the other organizations in town doing a good job of converting Houston into the energy capital as opposed to the oil and gas capital, and looking at that energy transition very seriously. So, some of that's going to come into play, even if oil and gas shrinks a little bit from where it was before.
And half of it's kind of inflated optimism. I think once you see some positive things happening in the oil and gas world, it's going to trickle down into the other industries, and everybody will kind of rise together.
You mentioned hunkering down, and that triggered another thought in my mind. I mean, we're now, 3 years post Harvey, which was the latest in a series of things that have blown through Houston. There was Ike before that, Allison way back in 2001, that kind of affected where people build and how people build. Did any real change come out of Harvey? Did you see anything in the real estate space that said, it really impacted where people are building or how they're thinking about office space?
Well, my knowledge is going to be more in the commercial side versus residential. But
I'm thinking commercial.
Residential, those places that struggled during Harvey are still struggling. I would think on the with moving real estate in those areas. As far as commercial space goes, I know that I'd say just about every building that had flooding issues had to completely change the way that all of their mechanisms worked within the building, and put them on the roof and put them in higher levels in the building and plan for the future, and not French drains, but a commercial size French drain, if you will, around the building to make sure that this won't happen again. So that changed, but I mean, I'm doing a deal right now in a building that did flood. And they made all these improvements and made sure that this isn't going to happen again. And back to leasing the building back up.
Yeah, that was kind of my impression was, I drive by a few buildings, especially on the energy corridor side that I know flooded, and you can see they've put in backup generators jacked up on big concrete blocks. The IT department is no longer in the basement. It has definitely moved higher up the building and things like that.
What I have seen a little bit more of is kind of the common areas, amenities are all going to be, of course, on the first level or so, just, rather than the tenants actually occupying those spaces.
Yeah.
I think it's just become a little bit less attractive to be on that first level. And it's just easier to put conference rooms and common areas and Starbucks or whatever on that first level instead.
Yeah, let that be the sacrificial lamb for the for the floodwaters if they come back. You live and breathe the world of commercial real estate. The rest of us just sort of deal with it when we have to. So give us a couple of what are a couple of things that people don't know about? Where do you see people falling into traps and you go, God, I just wish everybody knew that before they got involved as a tenant in this kind of deal?
Well, I would say people don't realize how long the process takes. They tend to want to wait until 3, 4, 5 months out. And a lot of people think that's plenty of time. And maybe it is, can we make it happen in that period of time? Yes. But probably not on the terms that you'd like. I would urge, groups to focus on things 8, 9 months out. to give themselves ample time to make a run at multiple different options. And, that gives you ample time to do construction, build out, all the necessary things, get all your T's crossed, I's dotted, and give yourself plenty of time where you're not running into any holdover issues at your current building. I would say, give yourself lead time. And options are important. Options create leverage. In a market like this, you only have to reach out to 2 or 3 because they're all fighting for the deal. But in a different market, a lot of times you have to kind of leave it, no stone unturned and go in a bunch of different directions to provide the most, adequate, impressive terms. So that would be my number one. Gosh, there's so many different things.
Hire a good commercial real estate representative.
Of course, hire a good commercial real estate. I would say, and I say this a lot, at meetings is, I'd rather find out that you guys, worked with one of my competitors than with, than going directly with the landlord. I mean, obviously the landlord's rep's duty is to get the, most money for their landlord. They're not an advocate for you. And frankly, you really need an advocate, on your side.
Yeah. And I'm going to make the assumption that although there are similarities, it's very different from buying and selling a private house.
Absolutely. I just sold and bought a house. And yes, I can say it's very different. It's really just a completely different animal altogether. It's in the residential world, especially if you're talking about yourself, the person that's buying and selling yourself, there's just so many different emotions involved with a space that you're going to be living in for your personal life.
I don't really have a feel for how many different groups or people own the office buildings in Houston. I mean, are there mega corporations that own? I mean, I know you've got like the Memorial City area is all one. Yeah, largely one developer. I mean, are any of these developers in trouble? I mean, is it a good time to go out and buy a building from them? Is it turning up their world as well?
Well, I don't know you mentioned the Memorial City, the Metro National Group.
That's right. Yeah.
I would think in some ways they're in trouble. I don't know that they're going to be selling off their portfolio. First part of that question is there's probably less groups than you might think. There are a lot of groups that are large institutions that own a lot of real estate.
So the Berkshire Hathaways of the world own, some slice of it or whatever, right?
Yeah. But, there's also a lot of really smaller mom and pop type, those are probably going to be the ones that are moving quick. They're going to be hurting more, that don't have a large portfolio, just have kind of the smaller, smaller buildings that may be hurting. And frankly, probably don't, haven't run into this. Not that anyone's run into this issue, but haven't run into the type of struggles that we're running into now and don't know how to field it.
Good stuff, John. Really appreciate it. So one last thought. What kind of business do you guys specialize in? Who should contact you? I mean, you've just said 9 months out. So that's how soon they should be reaching out to get your thoughts on things.
I wish they'd be reaching out to me. Chances are I'm going to be reaching out to you. But, we work with all types of anybody that leases office space in Houston or really nationally, we can help. I work with a lot of oil and gas, attorneys, financial services, business services, you name it. If you use office space, I can help you. So those are the kind of groups I work with. Yeah. Really more middle market focused, I'd say. I'm not working with I keep referring to Google as the largest company in the world or something, but the Googles of the world, I'm not really working with the Googles of the world, but more the middle market focused is really what I'm after.
John, it's always a pleasure. It's great to talk to you this morning. We really appreciate your insights. If folks have questions, like I said, we'll put your direct email address in there. They'll be able to reach out to you. Obviously, they can reach out to us. We'll put everybody in contact. Thank you very much for sharing your insights.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. Have a good weekend.